and welcome to this episode of the Daring to Dad podcast. We're having conversations at the intersections of fatherhood, faith, and masculinity. I am thrilled to introduce my guest today, Ryan Meeks, joining us from beautiful Bend, Oregon. Ryan, along with his wife, Michelle, has dedicated his life to guiding others towards healing, self-discovery, and deeper connection. With a background that spans 20 years as an ordained minister, Ryan now offers what he calls unspiritual direction, which is really a pragmatic, heart-centered approach to cultivating a sacred way of living beyond traditional religious frameworks. Ryan works with individuals, couples, and groups on topics that range from psychedelic journeys to relationships, holistic health, and spirituality. Whether it's preparing for a transformative experience, offering compassionate guidance during a journey, or helping people integrate the lessons back in their daily lives, Ryan creates a safe and nurturing space for growth. I can't wait to dive into this conversation. We also talk about his journey battling cancer and how that has transformed his life. Let's get into it. Ryan, thanks for joining the Daring to Dad podcast. So good to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I always like conversations like this because we haven't spent time talking at all. We're just now meeting. And so this is exploratory for people listening, and it's very exploratory for me. So I'm excited to get to know you a bit more.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm pumped. We'll see where this goes,
Absolutely. The reason I invited you to be on the podcast is I've been following you on social media for a little while, and I felt like we've walked some similar roads when it comes to life and ministry, life as parents, and some of these ways I think our stories intersect. But I thought I'd start out with a question that I've been asking a lot of people who've joined this podcast, is to get to know you a little bit more. I was wondering if you talk about some of your early impressions of what it meant to be a man and what it meant to be a dad. What formed that idea early on for you as a young man? And what environment were you in? What was that like?
Yeah, wow. That's a deep question.
Yeah, we're going for it.
So what's a thoughtful answer to that question? My earliest memories are, well, first of all, they're pretty, scattered in just like flashes and images and feelings. And, they center around my immediate family. And I was about to mention religion, but to be honest, I really think my first images don't come from there. They just come from family and my sense of feeling that manliness was being modeled by my dad and by my grandfathers. And one in particular, that I was the most close with, my mother's father. So I think it was mostly just by watching and absorbing what the men in my universe were up to. Just about caring and protecting and nurturing and leading and providing.
Yeah. What was he like? Is it, you said maybe your mom's dad? What were some of those attributes that you on him that really spoke to you?
Yeah, well, he's been a towering figure in my life, my whole life. Sherman Nordquist was his name, and I
love it.
I could talk about Sherm all day long. I loved him dearly. He was a very important person in my life because he was so gentle. He was such a kind, tender, gentle man, gentle with the earth, gentle with children, gentle with people, gentle with his wife. So I got really up close and personal, imagings and examples of what it's like to be a man that were soft, not weak. It wasn't about weakness, but it was just about almost like a good gardener, this like really careful and intentional and nurturing.
Do you think Sherman was unique for that generation. And maybe a lot of these are just stereotypes we put out about that generation of man, right? Do you think
Yeah,
he was unique, or do you think, what's your take on that?
I do. Yeah. I mean, if you'd asked me when I was a kid, I was just like, this is what grandpas are.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
but I now know that that's certainly not the case for most of my friends. So I'm no sociologist, but yeah, I mean, my short answer is yeah, I think he's an outlier.
Mm.
I think he was a interesting and a unique individual. And I think, when I think about fathers, like he's probably one of the most important male. I mean, my own dad would say that Sherman had the biggest impact on him,
Mm.
um, as it relates to, you know, masculinity and growing into a healthier vision of that for himself once he, met my mom. So major figure for sure.
Yeah. Do you think we get Do you think we get softer as we get older? Do you think age has a way of doing that?
No.
Was he always that way, or does age play a part of that for him?
Well, I mean, I only intersected, when I entered the world, he was already in his later life. So what could I know? I
Right.
don't know.
Yeah.
Um, my sense is that people don't change that much, though. I
Mm.
mean, I'm 46 now, and I'm getting to the place where I know people change, and of course I live in the world of transformational coaching work and couples work and psychedelic work, so I believe in change, but to a point, I think there's kind of a field on which you can
Hmm.
move, but you're
Yeah.
still limited by that, and so much of the personality is pretty set at a certain point in life, and
Hmm.
yeah, I think that. Well, let me even say this. I think you can get softer as you age and more gentle, maybe is a better way to say it.
Mm.
But you can also get way harder.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I can't remember where I heard this, but somebody was saying, people usually just become the extreme version of themselves when they become elderly. You either have like
Oh,
the
interesting.
sweetest people on earth or the, angry, bitter old codgers at a nursing home. It's one or the other. I spent a decent amount of time in nursing homes. Uh, and I would say that's certainly borne out to be true in my experience. Like it's kind of one or the other. There's like really hard, difficult individuals or just like the most sweet,
Yeah.
tender bears in the world. So, yeah, I think
Was
age.
there something that that you observed or you have observed that is kind of that fork in the road for people where they take one path or the other? But what determines that
Hmm.
for people?
Yeah. I mean, it's 1,000 decisions a day, I think.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I really do think, obviously that we all have, these moments or experiences that our life pivots on, right? These
Hmm.
big moments. But, ultimately that's a thousand tiny little decisions every day.
Hmm.
Who we're becoming, what it feels like to live in integrity with our values. That's really what's going to get us where we're going.
What have been some of those big moments for you? Those moments where they were those catalytic type of moments for you for any shifts in your life. You've shared, been to your website and other place like that. You've talked about faith and different kind of things like that. What have been some moments for you?
Oh man, like moments that have really shifted my life. I mean, becoming a pastor was a big one early on as a young man. That launched me in a on a certain trajectory, um, and then you know, sort of going through my exit from formal religion. That was a massive world-changing worldview shift. Getting cancer was another one. The birth of my kids, all of them.
Hmm.
That shifts my reality. My first intentional work with high dose psychedelic drugs
Hmm.
totally reshaped me. Um, every time I moved,
Yeah.
I've moved quite a bit, but moving,
Mm-hmm.
different states, things like that, totally uprooting our family, all these
Yeah.
moments where you have to sort of reset your life. And I think all of those, whether it's kids or drugs or losing faith or whatever, have
Mm-hmm.
all been moments where you have to reorganize yourself. You're
Right.
like, whatever I was, it's not here. And so this whole setup, the structure of my life, the way that I conceptualize who I am in the world or how to make meaning out of this, it's no longer functional because I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
The guy who got me here is not here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of a
Yeah.
situation.
I think the way that I'm framing that in my life, and I've had other people talk about this too, this idea of like masculine initiation and like initiatory type of experiences, right?
Yeah.
That sometimes can be moments of our choosing, right? Like a move, a shift in career, but sometimes these are things that are forced on us, not of our own, choosing. Like something like cancer, which I definitely want to talk about while you're here
Yeah.
with me, but that stripping away, where we're left to like really take an honest look at ourselves. That can be this transforming experiences for us as men, and at least that's the way that I'm like framing it in my mind these days, because I've been through my own major shifts as well. But I'm curious about your time as a pastor. How old were you when you became a pastor? You talked about being a young man.
Yeah, I was. Well, I was already working in ministry as a music minister and a youth pastor, but so there's a couple years before that. But when I was 25, my wife and I started a church from scratch in the Seattle area.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
still really young, but I think 4
Did you
years
grow up
before
in that world? Did you grow up were you in the church growing up?
Yep. Yeah, my dad is a pastor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's retired, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was the same way. I mean, I grew up around ministry. I was involved in ministry all my life. Picked up a guitar when I was 15 years old. Was leading like youth and young life like stuff and
same.
church, all that. And
I was in the church more than my house.
you were what?
I was in the church building more than I was in my house.
Yeah. Right. That was my whole world, like my identity, right?
Totally.
Was wrapped up in that. And I moved up here where I'm at. I live in Sacramento now. I moved up here 2004, like right after I finished college, just to plant a church. I mean, I was like,
oh wow,
I was a bright, shiny 22-year-old, like kid, and I had my own, in my mid late 20s. Or my exodus from that world happened, but I want to hear about you. What led to a point for you of stepping away from that life? What transpired to bring you there?
To leaving ministry?
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. So I mean, it's in broad strokes. It started because I like to say success failed me. So the church became a mega church in just a short few years, and by the time I had like this. Big, it was actually a small staff, but to me it was a lot of people. It was a huge church, little staff, but basically I was no longer able to like be the like startup guy anymore. Like I had a finance department and staff, and I wasn't driving the truck and setting everything up and leading the music and teaching. By the time we got there, and things were just jamming, and we were an established, like, one of the fastest growing churches in America or whatever. I finally had time to sit down and catch up with my heart. And it was like, all these things that I'd been pushing down just came rushing up, like, just like the I don't know, the tormentors of my soul that I couldn't hear because I was so busy doing everything and living so stressed out, quiet, brought them forward. And I was just riddled with doubts. And I'd always felt like a JV, junior varsity Christian. I never had the kinds of experiences other people claim to have. I always begged God to speak to me. And here I was at the top of the game, like, running this big successful church. And I'm like, I feel like God's a million miles away from me. Like, I'm trying, I believe in the ethical virtues of this, the Sermon on the Mount, essentially. But so I just had to face that. That's where it started to crack. And that time forced me to like go inward. And I read the Bible all the way through a couple times, and that made it way worse. And so, I mean, speeding right along, ultimately I just read everything I wasn't supposed to read, like tons of other religions. And
all the books that were in the naughty section of the church library growing up, right?
Totally. Or just like not even in the church library whatsoever,
Yeah.
We're talking, Hindu texts and Buddhist texts and philosophy. And I just got to a place where I was just like, I just realized I didn't believe any of this anymore. And here I was running a mega church. And I was worried that my wife would leave me and, my whole world would crumble. So I just faked it for a few years until it got so painful internally that I was like, I have to start saying this. So I talked to my wife and, that ultimately it was hard for a little while, but I've always had such a good relationship that I was just like telling her from my heart, like, I love you. Nothing has changed here. In fact, if anything, you have priority finally.
Right.
From this thing I'm chasing that I can't seem to connect to. I just had to be honest about where I'm at. And then once I knew I was going to be okay in my marriage, then it was like, okay, now I can start saying these things publicly. Rather than just resigning, like I kind of felt like I had started a church intentionally to tell to just have an authentic space. And I'm like, what's more authentic than me telling what's actually going on in my journey? There's plenty of churches. It's not like, oh no, what happens if our church goes away? Nobody's going to care. There's plenty of churches everywhere. So let's just do something unique, interesting, even if it just burns to the ground. So, we tackled a bunch of things. I mean, we were in Time magazine as being like the largest evangelical church that made a formal statement for LGBT inclusion in 2015, which was before the Supreme Court ruling in the United States. So it was an intense time. And then, just spent a few years trying to like help people uncouple from what I saw as like a sort of a gaslighty fear system of like hell, the threat of hell being the god of Christianity and things like that. Eventually, I did that for a few years and kind of just felt like it was time to go. And at the end of 2019, I was just kind of tired of arguing about, because you do stuff like that publicly, people get kind of upset.
I can only imagine.
Right. And I just got bored of arguing about the Bible. Like I just don't, I don't care.
Right.
I don't care, man. It's okay. You keep believing. So I needed to shift out, and that's when we moved to Encinitas, California. And I kind of skipped that I had cancer during that period in 2017. But all of that sort of was a big time shifting space in my life where I'm like, what do I care about? What do I believe in? Especially with cancer, like, okay, I think I'm going to survive this, but this is a good time to circle up and be like, what am I doing? What do I want to do? I'm going to die someday, maybe sooner than I want to.
Yeah.
Am I doing this the way I want to do it? And just sort of whittled my whole life philosophy down to two phrases. Life is a gift, love is the point. Everything else is all speculation, but my sense is that, life is a gift. Gratitude is the first movement, right? Thank you to whatever. I certainly am not under the illusion that I made this, or made myself here. And then the second movement that, love is the point, just meaning that like at the end, I'm not going to really care about who screwed me over or yelled at me or who owes me money or whatever. Like, if you're able to be conscious as you breathe out your last breath, I don't think all the negative things are going to be what you're going to sort through. It's just going to be like, all I care about is like the love I got to give and the love I got to receive. And
right.
In that case, I should live that way now, right? Like how I would like to choose to consciously die, which I decided would be saying I love you to the people in my life. I think sort of ironically or paradoxically becomes the way to live life, right? Like if that's how I want to die, then why don't I live that way?
Yeah.
So
right. Yeah.
Leaving faith and then beating cancer just sort of like kind of gutted me and set me on a foundation of very little beliefs. You know, life is a gift, love is a point. And that seems to be enough to build a life on.
I'm curious, like, I mean, it's really interesting. And I don't know what you, like, believe about this. I remember in the aftermath of me when I walked away from being involved in faith communities. And very similarly, like, I was involved in this very, like, progressive, forward-thinking community, you know, at kind of at the end there. But for me, I still felt like I was getting out, putting on the show, having to be this thing, right? Feeling like incredibly lonely being up there, like on the stage, which I heard them say, like, if you want to hide in church, like, get up on stage. Like, it's like, can be this very, you know, I don't know if you experienced that, but can feel just very isolating. And who I was and what was going on in my life, there became this, like, this separation that I think you said became very painful. I relate a lot with that.
Yeah.
And even stepping out of that, the aftermath of walking away from something that I found so much of my identity in, not just like my psychological, like the building blocks of my whole psychology were on this thing and who I was as a person, who other people were, what's mine to do. But it was like, okay, it was my vocation. It was my social, like, world, everything kind of crumbled down. And in the aftermath, for me, I went through some health things too. Nothing, I think, compared to what you walked through, which I want to hear more about. I have something called Meniere's disease. And in it really peaked in the struggle that I was going through, in the aftermath, and the major shifting. And I don't know if that was my body, like, dealing with some of the intensity of that season of life. Right? Do you see, I mean, I don't know, do you feel any connection between all these things kind of happening at the same time?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know stress, you know, turns on your genetic predispositions to certain diseases or autoimmune disorders. So that's just science. And then, of course, you can get as woo-woo as you want to on this. But yeah, I mean, I for sure think that the grief and the pain and the stress and like, I didn't, like, you throw my Bible on the ground and pee on it like some sort of, like, rebellious teenager. I wept over the loss of Jesus. Like, I laid in front of the sandcastle of my faith while the tide of knowledge and global travel and experiences with the LGBT community and Hindu and atheist friends washed it away, wave after wave. And I couldn't lie to myself that these notions didn't make sense to me anymore. Some of them offended my heart deeply, and then others were so ridiculous that, you know, they made as much sense as, you know, the stories of the Polynesian god Lono. You know, I was like, I'm not compelled by this. I'm not afraid of this any more than, you know, some evangelical Christian would be afraid of a totem pole.
Yeah. What do you say? Do you talk with a lot of people who are maybe on a similar place that you once were, where the questions are bubbling up to the surface and it feels really big and scary, and oh my gosh, what is it cost me to begin to open up some of these things? What do you
Totally.
say to people who are in a space like that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I never I never want to get people to go to a place I think they need to go.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's violent to try to take away someone's faith, you know.
Hmm.
You could be evangelical in your beliefs no matter what the beliefs are. We've seen this in our current political system, right? It's like, I
Yeah.
need to consume you for my team
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
reject you as an idiot. You know, there's only
Man,
these
that dude,
binaries.
I gotta pause. That's powerful. Like, I think that is really powerful. I experienced that. Like, I mean, I left church immediately, and I got involved in like a lot of really heavy activism, and like I was
Yeah.
going to these groups, and shortly after, I was like, I found some of the same type of fundamentalism
Oh, yeah,
in those spaces that I found in this. It was just in a different package,
totally. I found the
right?
same thing in this sort of new age spiritual
Mm-hmm.
bullshitty, you know,
Yeah.
Zen boyfriend circles, you know,
Yeah.
men's work, all this
Yeah.
men's work. It's just like, you know, man buns and disassociating. Um,
Mm-hmm.
anyway, uh,
Yeah.
I think evangelicalism is a way of holding beliefs. It's not even so much a set of beliefs, although I'm
Mm-hmm.
aware that evangelicals have a set, you know, we
Mm-hmm.
believe. I just think deconstructed evangelicals, who I certainly work with a fair amount, don't realize that they're still evangelical. They just exchanged the content of the
Mm-hmm.
boxes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I like to invite people, if the journey they want to go on is to leave that behind, is to deconstruct that way of holding, you know.
Yeah.
But for people who are in this situation of like, oh, all this is bubbling up and I'm scared and what's this going to cost me, you know? To me, it's all about going slow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, especially if you grew up evangelical, there's all this pressure always to like be ready to like answer and argue for your position on everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remind people at the very beginning, like, that's not an objective reality. You can just opt out of that. You don't owe anybody an explanation for anything, period.
Mm.
So relax. Take your time. You can not know things.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that
yeah.
that's really, really powerful about like, taking it slow. And I wish I had that kind of counsel in the midst of what I was going through, because I
Mm,
found that like I got really angry
mm,
first and foremost. Like I was angry about a lot of things. I
mm,
was angry about what I felt like I had been sold, and then I was mixed in with a lot of guilt about things that I had said,
yeah.
done, people I had probably hurt along the way, and I was like
Mm-hmm.
really, really angry. And I started getting out there and like just like throwing rocks at the side of the church building. You know, it was
Yeah,
just this really easy target, right? All these
totally.
things that like all these criticisms. I was really
Yeah.
angry, and I would also say that that anger and that outrage, like, probably got me even some attention from being just loud and now on the outside,
Yeah.
like lobbing stones at the side
Yeah.
of the church building, right?
Totally.
And
Yeah.
and I think that was you know, anger, right? And grief and loss is all like a part of, you know, that process, right?
Mm.
But I think what you're saying or talking about, like, I don't think I did a really good job of kind of checking because again, I just traded one like fundamentalism or evangelicalism for like another.
Yeah. And that's what,
I found another cause, I found another way of doing it, and I was kind of doing the same thing, and it only
yeah.
later as I moved on have I kind of softened that out, and now can even hold where I've been, my own past, my old beliefs very gently, and even look at them with some appreciation. But I think that took some time for me to get through, and that felt really messy.
Yeah. Totally. It's really common. I mean, what you're describing there is what I see all the time, where people think they're going through all this transformation and all they're doing is their ego is changing outfits. You
Yeah,
know, it's like
yeah,
this like
yeah.
really tight ego that's so scared and self-defensive, always
Hmm.
defining itself against. I
Yeah,
am not you. You know, I'm.
yeah, yeah.
That's
Right.
the ego. The ego without something to push off against it doesn't exist. The ego just evaporates without something to push off. So it's a very adolescent, stage of consciousness, and it's I like the word stage because it's like, yeah, it's an unavoidable stage. Like, you need to finish the work of that stage to move on. And if you're not done, then you'll just kind of keep looping there for a while and changing outfits, and I'm this, I'm that, I'm not this. I used to be goth, now I'm, whatever.
Right.
Have fun, but as soon as you're ready to get off that merry-go-round, it's less about that and more about deconstructing the interior castle of awareness. Yeah, that's harder work. It's quieter work.
It is. I love what you say about like taking it slow. That's such simple, but I've facilitated groups and stuff around, kind of spiritual, deconstruction and all this kind of stuff, and working with people who are like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Like, I've had these experiences in my life. I've met these people. I did this trip and traveled, and all of a sudden all these things about my world are coming into question. And I think it takes some time and experience to like hold space for that and like guide that well. I don't think I was probably equipped at one point in my life because of just that anger and resentment and the rage that I had to really like help people through some of that. And I think what you're saying is important about that, the easing people, and I think really important, like, hey, I'm not trying to tell you to like give it up.
Oh no, I think I'm
not trying to tell you to like lose it and cut off all your evangelical friends who voted this way, or do all that, because I think there is some of that out there.
Oh my God, I think a large percentage of people need to stay in church.
Yeah,
I mean that. I'm so thankful that there are lots of different kinds of church. I visited a few churches for the first time in years when we moved here to Bend, Oregon, and no surprise it wasn't for me, but it was a good experience, and I was like, oh, I'm just glad there are these kinds of places for people who are asking these questions. I'm not asking any of those questions, so it's not something I want. But I think a lot of people mistakenly think that, oh, well, I don't believe this and this, so I need to leave the church. And I would just say, churches are full of people who don't believe that. But you may not. You could just be honest with yourself about that. You don't have to tell anyone what you do and don't believe. That's up to you and how you want to structure your relationships. But be careful that you don't just like burn down your community. Like, church provides pretty decent options for community for a lot of people in the United States. Yeah. And
I miss that,
just
man.
Keep going.
I honestly think I am still figuring out how to like make friends as like an adult, like, because when you grow up in the church, you're just like, oh, you got these friends. We're all coming to this thing every week, sometimes multiple times. And I remember getting out of that. I'm like, oh man, like how do I meet people now? Like, what do I do? How do I make that work? And I still don't think I've quite figured out.
Festivals.
That's what I maybe. So yeah, that's interesting. Just to transition a bit, man, into some of your battle with cancer, and I've seen you've posted pictures and kind of like these before and after, and the transformation that you made. Like, I feel like what was that like is not an appreciative enough question about what that was, that experience for you. So maybe even just more specific is, what did that teach you? What were some of the biggest things that experience taught you about life and about, I think this space is talking a lot about fatherhood and masculinity. What are some things that took away from you as a man, as a father, in that experience?
Well, it certainly sobered me right up to the truth of death. Like, I'm really grateful. Like, death has become like such a dear friend of mine as a result of cancer. Death was always something that like happens to other people, and when I got cancer, I was like, okay, this is gonna walk with me forever now, because I'm more likely to get cancer than someone who hasn't had cancer before now for the rest of my life. And so
when you say that death is a dear friend, do you mean that like Like, what do you mean? Do you mean you're not afraid of it? That you welcome it? Like, what do you mean by
Yeah.
it's a friend?
Good question. Yeah. I think, well, death is like a part, it's like a part of the conversation of my life. Like it's no longer something I throw way out in front of me. Like I'm like, death is a part of the conversation about how I'm going to live my life. It's like I'm reminding myself constantly of my work. I mean, I'm covered in skulls and
Yeah.
reminders as a result of that experience that remind me that in, two blinks. I mean, I have two adult children who are out of the house and have been for many years now. And I have two boys who are teenagers, and they're in a blink they're going to be gone because I've already raised two, and I cannot believe they're 25 and 21.
Hmm.
But that's what death is. Death is like, right, yesterday is dead. Like death is always right at your heel. Like whatever is behind you is dead. It's taken. Death has claimed it. And I think choosing to embrace that as a cheerleader instead of something you need to be afraid of really reshaped the energy of my awareness, where I would place my focus. Like, okay, there's nothing to hold on to because all of it goes back. Like we will return everything to the earth. So allow death's gift of mortality to be what makes me invincible. Like what, instead of like, oh, what if I lose everything? You're going to lose everything.
Mm.
Death's coming.
Yeah,
it's
there's no
already
what
taken
if.
everything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
From 2 seconds ago backwards. Death has claimed it. So let that be your invincibility. Let that be your Mario star, right? Once you just claim death, right? Just
Exactly.
fucking cruise, bro.
Yeah.
And it's like, go, love wastefully, take the risk, reach out, make a friend, fall in love, give your heart away. Say the thing that you're terrified of saying. Tell the people who matter to you why. That's been the transformational gift of cancer, is like dump yourself out empty. Because that's the default anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like what's the phrase? Die now and avoid the rush, right? At the end of your life, you can do a whole lot of scrambling because you're going to instantly, if you're conscious, you're going to do a ton of you're going to sort your shit out right there, either in your own mind or on a hospital bed or it's, laid out in the middle of the freeway.
Yeah.
So make life about doing that work, now.
Yeah.
Make peace with your story, with your parents, with your neighbor, with your children, with your spouse, with your understanding of whatever God means, even if it's not God, even if it's with the universe. Make peace with the universe. Make peace with reality being as it is. Forgive it for not giving you the life you wanted. Like, quit that adversarial push-up. That's the ego again. Fuck you, universe. You didn't give me what I wanted. I don't believe in God. People treat the life as God, no matter what. People who don't believe in God are like angry at life. Now, you just change the name again. God, life, whatever. You're mad at God. So that adversarial energy is going to poison your body, right? It's going to give you cancer or whatever, something. Turn on some autoimmune diseases. We need to find a way to come to a place of rest, or what we call inner peace, or what Christians call the peace that passes understanding, or the Buddhists call the clear light of Dharmakaya. I don't give a shit what you call it. The point is, we need to find rest inside. And if you can do it now, then you can live from there.
Yeah. You stared this moment, this cancer, like staring death in the face, right? And it was in this room, in this experience that you had. What is it now in your life? And and practice. I feel like there's such gravity to what you're saying. Like I'm feeling it in my body as you're talking, like this, this yes feeling to that, and even I even feel like in my shoulders, like the weight of all the like just burdens that I put on myself, right? That I consume all the time and that I think I need to be, right? Like what are things in your life that keep you attuned to that? Like, hey, you stay in this, what you're talking about. And I know it's maybe not an impossible state of being. What are practices in your life that are helping you, reminding you of that, grounding you in that, and moving forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. Important question, so that it can be, material, out of the conceptual and into the flesh. So nature is one. Like, the further we get from nature, the less awe we experience. And I think awe is connected to that sort of bliss experience of falling into death with acceptance. Like, the natural world is like an absolute miracle.
So
like,
insane. Yeah. It's wild. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Right? You
Yeah.
took a hike up to the falls the other day, and it's like, it could have been anything, but this is what the universe produced right here in the middle of Nowheresville, Milky Way.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
So when we put ourselves in these spaces, right, the cathedral of the planet, right, like the whole thing, right, is this cathedral. It opens us to this like space of humility and awe and wonder that reminds us that it's all this like radical gift of reality. And I think that's one that it sets us in right relationship to reality. Again, for some people, God, but right relationship to reality is to find myself held in the middle of a miracle, right?
Yeah. There is something that happens to us, like physiologically, psychologically, like spiritually, like when you step out into the wild or into the unknown. It doesn't have to be anything insane either. Like, I live a block from the American River. I'm running through the city. Even if I take a walk alongside of that and feel that energy, there's something happening in me. I feel it.
And we're organic, and we're not on the earth. We're earth creatures. That's why they're not wearing space suits when they're on the moon. They're earth suits, dude. Those are earth suits because you can't live without an earth suit. You're an earthling. And so, when you look at like factory farm chickens or free range chickens, the ones that are in there with like the fluorescent lights and they can't move and they're like, produce nonstop.
Right.
They look shitty.
Yeah.
Right. And the ones that are roaming around living free as they are on the land look good.
Yeah. And that's why they're better for us, right? Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah.
Like, look at us. We're in cubicles and we're in fluorescent lights and we're like, blue light constantly, and we're not moving around. And get out and sit on the ground and allow the body to slow down, because it will literally sync up with the natural rhythms and pace of a planet that breathes and takes a whole season out of 4 to rest.
Yeah.
So that's one.
Yeah.
Nature. And then I'd say, some sort of quiet contemplation, reflection, meditation is one way to phrase that. I think that's one. And then probably community, some form of like, tending to my relationship garden is the other.
Yeah.
Because what is life without relationships? I mean,
sure.
Yeah.
Now, part of your work and working with people is psychedelics, right? And that's been a part of like your work and your journey. I want to hear about this, and because I'm someone, and I think I've talked to a lot of other guys out there who can relate with this, and maybe you're in my shoes. So I'll just put myself in that seat that are like really open to this, curious about it, but maybe don't fully understand it, and are just kind of like, that looks like really interesting, or just kind of on the fence about that. Like, how would you describe the work you do in that world to how would I describe a hopeful skeptic,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so there's a bunch of different angles to take on this.
Mm-hmm.
The current darling of our culture is like neuroscience and all
Mm-hmm.
that, which I think is interesting and cute. So maybe I'll talk about that a little bit, but let me just rewind first by saying a couple things that sort of some cautions. Number one, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think anybody has to do psychedelics. Like
Mm-hmm.
this
Mm-hmm.
is it's fine. You can live a beautiful, wonderful life and never do psychedelic drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and these are powerful. They work really well, but they're powerful. So don't go messing around. It's like, you should have a gun safe and you should not let your kids drive your car when they're 7 years old.
Right.
There's plenty of things in life that are dangerous. So let's not just be
Yes.
like, oh, they're dangerous. Well, yeah, you're right. So is the iPhone and,
Mm-hmm. Right.
turning on the shower too hot.
Yeah, getting in your car, driving down the road. Yeah, sure.
It's part of being an adult is
Yeah.
learning to deal with a world where there are, the threat of harm. Psychedelics are certainly part of that equation. So for me, psychedelic, I had done, some drugs in high school but the first time I did intentional high dose psychedelic work was many years into pastoring
Mm-hmm.
after losing my evangelicalism and all the rest of that, and one of my mentors saying, like, I think you're ready to move into this space. So in the matter of the first hour, I was like, oh my God, this is everything religion promised me but never delivered on.
Yeah.
And I immediately knew in that moment I would chase this as far as I can chase it. So for some people, that's not necessarily going to be their wiring. But for me, I was like, this was opening up the universe, opening up my mind in ways that I never knew was really possible. So I went pretty hard on it for a while. Like, oh my gosh, how you guys have been doing these without forcing me to for all these years. Like, someone should have grabbed me by the throat and yanked me here a long time ago. So I did everything I could do. For about a year, my wife and I were just on a hard charge of exploring in that sense. And then eventually got it, into formal mentorships and really digging into getting ourselves educated on these things or whatever. And so the work that we do these days is we help people who have already had or are planning to do an experience. So we help them with the preparation, and then afterward the integration of the experience. Like, what do I do now with this sort of altered state experience? And for people who have a faith background, it's just essentially, a lot of times it's a sort of a therapeutic or mystical experience with meaning and the self. As it relates to all the studies that are coming out, people are having incredible transformations in relationship to anxiety and depression, and I'll leave it to, the myriad studies that are all over the internet to prove that to you, which I think is lovely. And we've certainly had a lot of clients that we've worked with have some of those types of outcomes. But what I'm most interested in actually is helping average people who are like, yeah, my life's good, but there's got to be more,
Yeah.
and getting through the sort of stuckness that we tend to get into in modern life. At the pace we're running, it's really hard to change anything because of the tyranny of the nonstop urgent needs of modern life. And psychedelics open us up to grander visions, bigger perspectives. They allow us to nurture a part of ourselves that needs tending. So the kinds of spaces we get into, it's really everything I got into pastoring for in the first place, just without a bunch of dogma. Like, I don't have a verse to back up everything. I don't have to prove everything with Mark chapter 4, it's just like, hey, in fact, you don't even have to believe anything. In fact, to use a scriptural verse, it's a taste and see situation here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All you have to do is have the courage to take, right? To take the communion,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak.
Yeah.
Take this
Sure.
Eucharist of mushrooms or whatever you're doing, and then ride the experience and be present to what arises in consciousness. And these things are remarkably powerful for reflecting back what is inside. What do I feel really? Getting in touch with the truth of my heart. Knowing what I want. What's ailing me? Like, what, for a lot of people, man, the first thing they experience is like this cork of what I call, a stack of overdue emotional bills,
Yeah.
especially men. And they just all of a sudden feel this dump truck of grief, anger, sadness, whatever emotion that they have just not been willing to be with.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big gifts of this kind of work, is just to sort of finally bring full presence to the truth.
Yeah.
Hey, this
I
is
guess
here.
a lot of guys would describe that just as like that stuck feeling, right? A lot of guys feeling just that stuckness and like not knowing like, I got this thing and it's all this stuff's kind of bottling up, but I'm feeling stuck,
Yeah. Well,
continue to show up and do the same thing every day to the same result, same thing, same routine, all that.
Totally.
This feels like it opens the door.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I even think ED, which is like, how many advertisements a day could I possibly get for ED? But I get them all the time.
Yeah.
And men in our culture are numb. We're numb. And I think certainly there's probably a shred of the population that needs to take a pill for like a physiological reason. But I think the psychosomatic reality of numbness, whether that has to do with your dick or your heart, men are numb because they haven't been taught or been offered an opportunity to feel. They don't know how to feel. They don't know what their feelings are going to do. What's going to happen if they feel them? Will they ever come back from that, chaotic maelstrom of emotion? And so that results in guys who don't even know what they want. Because how could you know what you want when you've been suppressing your feelings for so long? Your feelings are, guidance systems in life. And so, that's a huge part of at least the work, especially with men when we work with this stuff. My wife and I do this together. It's just helping men get in touch with their hearts. Like, what's going on, man? What's really in there?
And you guys don't actually facilitate the experience. Yours is the prep and the post.
No, we do. Yeah, we'll sit with people as well. We don't. Okay. So we're really clear about the legality. We don't sell drugs. Right. But it's not illegal. And I mean, for instance, if you go to a festival, which you should.
Sounds like I need to.
Yeah. Oh, they're amazing. There could be tents, like Burning Man's had them forever. But where there are people who are having a hard psychedelic trip, they're spinning out difficulty, they can come in and they can have people sit with them. And so in the same way, it's not illegal if someone's going to do mushrooms, for instance, it's not illegal to go and sit for them and help facilitate that experience. So that is what we do. Now, we also work with people, in Europe and in Australia who we're not able to be with. Yeah. We work on the pre and post, and then have certainly worked with people who take MDMA, which is not psychedelic. And so that's the only one that we've facilitated over video chat, where we're just talking, because that one's much more of like a sense of like really settling into the body, open-hearted, versus like, sort of the classic Alice in Wonderland, I'm sort of tripping. I would never facilitate that through
virtual
screen. But like I said, sometimes our clients are on different continents, so we'll facilitate from certain compounds over video chat.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's wild. I certainly never would have dreamed this would be where I ended up.
I think about that often too, like, thinking back to my, 22, 23, 24-year-old self, thinking about like where like I'm at now, and life, just so unpredictable. But I'm loving what you're doing, man. I really appreciate you popping in here and being vulnerable about where you've been, sharing some of your journey. Very cool.
Well, thanks for having me, man.
How can people find out like more about your work? I mean, I know you sounds like you do some work virtually. I know you sounds like you're in the Oregon area.
Yeah, we
How
live
do
in
people
Bend,
find your work?
but we work quite a bit in the Seattle area and San Diego, just because that's the other places we've lived, and so we have clients in there, so we do some travel as well. But online, it's loveisthepoint.com, loveisthepoint.com, and then I'm on Instagram. I don't really do a good job of talking about all this stuff on Instagram. It's mostly just pictures of my kids and me taking a hike or something. But I am
enjoying
on there.
life. Yeah.
But that's about it. I don't really do much other social media. So.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been a treat to get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah,
and,
man. You as well.
I'd love to stay connected. But
For sure.
Thanks for joining. Hey, if you're listening, give Ryan a follow on social media. Pop in there, say hi, check out his work. And man, again, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, man. Talk soon. Hey, thanks so much for watching, for listening. If you enjoyed it, one way you can support my work is by subscribing, by sharing, all of those things. Thanks so much. I'm incredibly grateful for your support.